Hello, I'm Anne, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make a pride mask. You can make these fitted, like this one is here, or rectangular with fabric ties or with elastic, whatever your preference is. Just a disclaimer before we get started, these are for home use masks. These aren't intended to substitute for medical grade masks. And then some general sewing tips. Anytime you're making something that's meant to be worn, it's a good idea to wash and dry the fabric before you assemble it under the same conditions that you intend to wash and dry the finished product after it's worn. And then it's a good idea to find some practice fabric to do a test run on this, just to make sure that you get the fit that you want before you put all of this hard work into constructing your fabric, and then you figure out that you've made a fit mistake. It's a lot less heartbreaking if you figure that out on your practice fabric first. So some materials that you'll need. I am using solid color cotton quilting fabric. You can use pretty much any fabric that you want to. You can even upcycle some old clothing, but the key that you want to remember is you want at least 2 layers just to give that added protection. A single layer, it's not going to be quite as much protection. I use a marking chalk to mark on dark colors, but you can just use a plain old marker or a pen or whatever you have laying around the house. Then you'll need some scissors, and you can either hand sew it using needle and thread, or you can use a sewing machine. And that's really about it. So the first step is to figure out what pattern that you want to be using. I'm going to be showing you this fitted pattern here just because the rectangular pattern is a little bit easier and it requires a little bit less explanation. But if you just Google homemade mask patterns, you can find a lot of really great ones and you can follow those instructions. This is mainly intended to be how to construct the pride fabric itself. So I have already done a test fit with this, and I've determined that this fits my face pretty well. If you find just a generic pattern on the internet, you'll want to make sure that it fits your face. If you have a really large or really small face, you want to adjust it to actually fit you. And then I have folded over a little bit at the ends because there's a couple different ways that you can attach the elastic or the string, and I've just included this little extra in case I want to make a casing to put the elastic through, but I'll show you that towards the end. So I've determined what my pattern is, and the key measurement here is how tall is it. So you want to measure and get your height, and then you want to add just a little bit on the top and bottom just to allow for some wiggle room for mistakes, because happy accidents do happen. Then you're going to want to decide which pride flag that you want. I will say that the ones with the fewer stripes, like this pan flag that I've got going on here, are a little bit easier to do the math on, but then you can do any combination, any number of stripes. This one here isn't, I'm not quite finished. I still need to add the black and brown stripes to it to make it a little bit wider, but once you've got the concept down, you can apply it to any flag, any color. And you can even do, like I've got here the bi pride flag, where the middle stripe is narrower than the outside stripes. So let's just start with the pan flag just to have some easy math. And let's pretend that this is 6 inches tall. Actually, I could measure it. Give me one moment. Actually, yeah, it's almost 6 inches tall on the nose. So if we do 6 inches tall, that'll be some good easy math here. So we see that that's 6 inches. These are 3 stripes. So your first inclination would be make each stripe 2 inches wide, correct? No, that won't give you enough seam allowance. Seam allowance, if I show you on the back here, is the bit of fabric that is sewn together that's not visible on the front. So I have done a 1/4 inch seam allowance just for easy math. So for each stripe, you want to do 2 inches plus a 1/4 inch seam allowance on this side and a 1/4 inch seam allowance on this side. So that makes each stripe 2.5 inches. And then when you sew it together, it'll be 6 inches across plus a 1/4 inch seam allowance on this side and a 1/4 inch seam allowance on this side, so that when you actually sew the mask together, your finished product will be 6 inches tall. And obviously that math is going to depend on specifically for you how tall your mask is, but once you get the concept down, you can customize it to what you want to do. And then with the Buy Pride flag, it's a similar concept. You just want to get the ratio of how wide the narrow stripe is compared to how wide the bigger stripes are. And then just because I'm proud of all my colors, but I want to show off, I also did the Trans Pride flag. And I'm working on some of the other colors, but fabric has honestly been a little bit difficult to get during all of this crisis. There's been a little bit of a run on the fabric stores, so I'm trying to work with what I've got at the moment. So I suggest taking a ruler and a pencil and marking all of your plan out on paper before you ever cut anything. And then even cutting the strips out of paper the same width that you think you're going to cut them out of fabric, just to do a test run to make sure that everything lines up as large as you think it's going to be. So then once you have all of your various stripes here, you're going to want to pretend this is 2 different colors of fabric, but you're going to want to put them right sides together. This is double-sided cotton fabric, so it doesn't really have a right side, but in general, if this was a patterned fabric, you'd want to put it right sides together, and then you'd want to just sew all along the edges. And if you're machine sewing, just remember to use your 1/4 inch seam allowance guide on your sewing machine. If you're hand sewing, I have found that the back stitch does a little bit of a stronger stitch. You can use a running stitch if you want to, but the back stitch is a little bit stronger. Either way, it's the same concept. And then once you have 2 together, then you just want to keep going. So your third one, keep going, and so on. And then the iron is really your friend at this point. I know a lot of us might not want to iron, but it really does help it look a little bit nicer. And then if you're looking at the particular flag that you have chosen, if you have a lighter color like this yellow is here in the middle, when you iron it, you want to press this extra seam allowance here, you want to press it towards the darker color, because if you press it towards the lighter color, then when you flip it over, you might accidentally see some of this darker pink or blue on the yellow. So it's just neater if you press it towards the darker colors. So then that's all assembled. It's the correct height, it's everything you want it to be, and you are left with a big piece of fabric. Now, how do you turn this into a mask? Well, if you're doing a rectangle, at this point, you just cut out a rectangle. But if you're doing a fitted pattern like this, you would lay your pattern. I need 4 hands. You would lay your pattern on the fabric, make sure it's relatively level, cut it out. Then you don't want to make the mistake of immediately cutting a second one of these. You want to flip your pattern over and then cut your second one. That way you have both sides of the mask and it's on the right side of the fabric. You don't have one that's on the right side and one that's on the wrong side. And I've got a couple of those cut out. Aha, here we go. Can't forget our Ace Pride. But so I have cut out 2 of these, and what you want to do is you want to take the right sides, put them together, line them up. So, and the way that you know that you're doing this right is on both sides you can see this messy stitching lines, you know, those are visible. So then this is where it gets into almost like quilting. You want to see where the stripes line up, and you want to make sure that you get that as close as possible, and then go ahead and pin at each color change so that you know that the stripes are lining up perfectly. Otherwise, you'll get what I did when I did my first trial, and you've got it kind of offset like this, and half the stripes are, you know, 1/4 inch apart from each other, and it just doesn't really look like a straight line. If you have them lined up correctly, your finished product, it should look like a straight line all the way across, even though it's 2 pieces. Then, let's see, here we go. You're going to want to sew them together along this curved part here, and then you're gonna open it up. Now, this is the lining fabric that I have used, that I'm going to use to back the pride flag fabric on the top. And this is just so that I don't have to, you know, put all this time and effort into making the fancy fabric for the front, and then nobody's gonna see it if it's gonna be on the inside. Pretend these are sewn together. You wanna put right sides together, and then again, check and make sure you can see the seam allowance on the outside, and then you're going to sew along this top side here, this bottom side here, and you're gonna leave the part that goes by the ears, you're gonna leave that open. That's gonna be where you're gonna flip the fabric. I've got one here that you can kind of hopefully see. I have sewn it. I've got the lining on the back. You could actually make this reversible if you wanted to. So if you did that, then it would be black. But then I've got the sides open here, and this is just how I turned the fabric, and I have it right side out. So at this point, both sides should show the right side. It would probably be helpful to go ahead and press this again at this point, just to make it a little bit neater and easier to sew. That's optional. I got in a hurry on this one because I was excited and I didn't do as much ironing as I should have, but it just helps it be a little bit neater. And then after you've ironed it, if you want to help keep it flat, you can also sew an additional line just on the very outside of this, just a straight stitch, just to help it lie flat just a little bit. But that's also optional. That's up to your preference. Then you're going to decide, am I using elastic or am I using fabric ties? If you're using elastic, this is pretty easy. You just tuck this in. You can see like that. And that's what it's going to look like when it's sewn. I'm going to clip this thread here real quick, one moment. Then you're going to take the elastic, measure it to, you know, how long you need it for your head size. You're going to pin one end inside this pocket, one end on this corner, and then you're just going to do a straight stitch down this row. Pretend this is level. And then you're going to want to double sew it just because you don't want to be out and, you know, one of the straps pop off. Then you're going to do the same thing on the other side. Now, if you're making these fabric ties here, it's honestly not that difficult. It's a whole lot easier than I thought it was going to be. It's the same concept as making the stripes for the flag. You're going to want to cut a strip of material maybe a little bit more than 1 inch wide. Then you're going to take it, you're going to fold 1/4 to the center, 1/4 to the center, and then you're gonna fold it in half, and then it's gonna make basically this little fabric tube. It's a whole lot easier if you kind of iron it a little bit as you're folding. It helps keep it in place. Or you can use what's called a bias making tool. I don't have one of those, but I'm definitely looking into them because they look pretty awesome. But then you're going to just sew down your folded fabric, and you're going to make probably a longer fabric strip than you actually need. Then this helps if you actually put the mask on your face and you kind of measure how far do you need specifically to tie at the top back and then at the base of your neck. The base of your neck, you're probably going to cut the strings shorter, and the one at the top of your head you're going to cut a little longer, like I've done here. Once you get the right length, I've just tied a little knot in this fabric strip here, and you're good to go. If you are doing a rectangular mask, pretend that this is a rectangle. You're going to do a similar thing to finishing the fitted one, but instead of sewing down the sides, you're going to put 2 pleats in like this. Just fold the material, make sure they're even, and then just sew down the edges like that. And then if you kind of pop it out a little bit, then it makes it a little bit more fitted to your face. You can even insert a wire for the nose, things like that, make it a little bit more comfortable. And yeah, I think that's about it. If I have gone too fast over something, or you have a clarification question, feel free to drop me a comment and I can help explain it in a little bit more detail. And yeah, happy sewing. If you, oh, one other thing that I thought of real quick. If you're in an area where it's not necessarily something that you feel comfortable going out in, you know, the full rainbow stripes like this, you can also, where did my pink go? You can pick a couple of the different colors, and you can even mix and match and do one side one color, one side the other color, and it's just still a little bit of a subtle way to still get your pride in. So yeah, happy sewing, and just let me know if y'all have any questions. Thank you and have a good night.